more gasoline-powered leaf blowers and all that baloney. Okay, so it has to be mandated, or it has to be in the very best obvious interest of people to change their behavior. It has to be something in it for them. It has to be there has to be an advantage to them changing their ways.
Charles, I'm going to be rude and interrupt you only because we are out of time and we've got to move on. But if you have anything real quick you want to say it in another 15 seconds because we've got to move on.
If people are going to change their behavior, they need a better alternative to what they currently have.
He's not wrong.
That's a great call, great point. Thank you very much, and I didn't mean to be rude and interrupt.
Thank you, Charles. After a quick break, Live Music Friday at the Boston Public Library is here. Tomorrow from 8 p.m. in the South End, Plaza Betances. The Festival Betances is a celebration of Latinx music, food, and culture. We're going to talk with some of the people behind the festival with a performance from Quattro player Juan Neves. And that's just after the break. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We have good news. YouTube.com/GBH News is now up and running for us, and you can see us there, or at Facebook.com/GBH News. Andrew Cabral is in for Jim Browder, who's on vacation, and we are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. And it is time for Live Music Friday tomorrow afternoon on the South End's Plaza Betances, the 50th iteration of Festival Betances. Celebration of Latin music, food, culture will take place. Rain or shine. I hope it's going to be better weather than they're predicting. Juan Neves is here with us. He and his orchestra will be opening this year's festival. We just heard them. They are great. They're going to play for us twice in just a couple of minutes with a stripped back edition, not the whole shebang, but you'll get the idea. And also at the Boston Public Library today is Vanessa Calderon-Rosada, CEO of IBA, the group behind the festival, built on a foundation of affordable housing advocacy, which has grown into offering community programs, housing assistance, and youth development programs for Boston's Latinx community. The website for more is IBA Boston, ibaboston.org. I got that right? I think I did. Vanessa and Juan, thank you very, very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having us. Very excited.
I'm very excited about this because I lived in the South End for years. Yes. And right down the street, first on Tremont Street, then on Shawmut, right down the street from Villa Victoria. So I have fond memories of the festival, had no idea about the history, about Ramon Betances. So that's where we're going to start. Talk a little bit, Vanessa, first about the creation of Villa Victoria.
Sure.
And then how this sort of festival came about, and then we're gonna go to Juan and the music, which is, and his last name is Nieves, by the way.
Oh, Nieves. Yes. Oh, our apologies.
I felt compelled to do that because that's what it is in Cape Verdean as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I thought you knew that, Andrea. And here I was following your example.
No, it was my mistake.
No worries.
Well, thank you first of all for having us. IVA, o Inquilinos Boricuas en Acción, was founded by a group of Puerto Rican activists back in 1968, 55 years ago, to develop housing to revitalize the neighborhood of the South End, and they created Villa Victoria. If we fast forward 55 years, IVA continues that. We have almost 700 units of affordable housing in the South End and throughout the city, as well as programs. And one of the programs, in addition to our early education program, youth development, resident services, and financial empowerment, is the arts. From the beginning, our founders felt that the arts not only were a wonderful way to celebrate our heritage, our culture, our history, but also as a way to bring the community together, to share our culture, and to build community, to make communities safer, more vibrant, healthier, prosperous. So 50 years ago, they started Festival Betances with that goal, with the goal of bringing people together and celebrate culture. And this year, as we celebrate our 50th edition, we are having a lineup of salsa, Caribbean salsa from Puerto Rico, from Cuba, and from the Dominican Republic. From 12 to 8 tomorrow in Plaza Betances, we will be celebrating that wonderful cultural tradition. And as you said, Andrea, the festival is named after Dr. Ramon Betances.
Yes, tell us about him.
Yes, he is a Puerto Rican patriot who was one of those Renaissance men of the 19th century in Puerto Rico. He fought for the independence of Puerto Rico from the Spanish crown, and he was an abolitionist, a doctor, a physician, a surgeon, an essayist, a poet. So it was really one of those people that we Puerto Ricans and Latin Americans as well, because he worked very closely with our Dominican brothers and sisters in their independence movement as well in the 19th century. So it's really a wonderful figure to honor, and after him, our festival is named 50 years ago.
So Juan, tell us about the music and what you're going to play for us in just a minute.
Well, the music that I'm going to be performing today is a summary of what's going to happen tomorrow, because tomorrow I have my full orchestra. For today, I just brought a small concept, which is a quintet. And, but we're going to be playing 2 original songs.
Okay.
The first one is called Raíces, written and composed by Juan Esteban. He's a Puerto Rican male. And arranged by Jonathan Quintero, and the second song is called Improvisador, which is a tribute and honor to the improvisadores, which are the singers that improvise in the folkloric music of Puerto Rico and other Latin American country. They call it payadores. But yeah, it's going to be a little mix of different cultures and rhythms.
Okay, so why don't we go over and you go over and get ready to start playing so we can hear both of these songs.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask Vanessa something, but go ahead.
Sure.
Andrew, if you want to.
No, go right ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, when you think of the neighborhoods in Boston, how much they've changed, the South End is one of the ones that's changed so dramatically. You talk about 50 years ago to now. So I would imagine housing has been not easy to achieve.
Correct.
Yeah.
And part of the mission of IVA is precisely to develop and preserve affordable housing in the city and in the neighborhood. And right now, we're in the process of creating and developing more housing. We're in the process of creating a new building that then will free up buildings that we're in, running programs to develop more housing in the neighborhood. So we're very excited about that as well.
Are we ready for some music?
Yes.
We all set up?
Okay, let's take it away.
Well, the first song is called Raíces. It's a tribute to the bomba culture of Puerto Rico and the African American rhythms. So it goes like this.
Saludos a todos los latinos allá. Nací en este país de padres puertorriqueños y me llevaron allí desde que yo era pequeño. En el barrio donde crecí fue donde yo fui aprendiendo las costumbres de mi país y cómo ser borinqueño. Óyelo bien, nunca olvides
De dónde son tus raíces.
Nunca lo olvides.
Nunca olvides de dónde son tus raíces.
Pero entonces yo volví, no me quedó más remedio, fue para sobrevivir y así comenzar de nuevo. No fue fácil para mí, le puse todo mi empeño para lograr construir cada uno de mis sueños. Óyelo bien, nunca olvides
de dónde son tus raíces.
Ay, nunca lo olvides.
Nunca olvides de dónde son tus raíces.
Soy tan solo un simple ejemplo de muchos que andan por acá, que viven del mismo sueño de un día poder regresar. Algunos logran hacerlo, a otros les sale mal. Se olvidan de dónde vienen y para dónde es que van. No lo olvides, nunca olvides
de dónde son tus raíces.
No olvides tus raíces.
Nunca olvides de dónde son tus raíces.
Ajá. A bailar todo el mundo.
Nunca olvides de dónde son tus raíces.
Ay, no te olvides de tus padres, no te olvides de dónde viniste.
Nunca olvides de dónde son tus raíces.
Así como vienes de por allá, trae lo que tú creciste, con lo que tú creciste. Vaya. Nunca te olvides, no, si viniste de cualquier parte, acuérdate de donde creciste.
Nunca olvides de dónde son tus raíces.
Ay, acuérdate de tu cuna, recuerda que eres boricua hasta en la luna.
Boricua hasta en la luna.
¿De dónde son tus raíces? Thank you.
Hey!
Juan, do you want to introduce the members of your band before you come back so we know who everybody is?
Hey, you want me to go there?
Well, you can do it from here or do it from there.
No,
over from there. Over from
Okay,
here.
let's
Back
go.
here. My mistake. Sorry about that. Yeah, we want to give credit to everybody that was in the band. What are we going to see tomorrow over the weekend?
Tomorrow we start at 12 with a wonderful, beautiful, very colorful parade that snakes around the south end, starting in Plaza Betances and ending in Plaza Betances. And then at 1 o'clock, we kick off the salsa music with Juan Nieves and his orchestra. And then we have salsa from Cuba, Barbarita Zamora. We have SBM, another local band. We have David Pavon coming from Puerto Rico. And then we close out at 6:30 with Jose Alberto El Canario, who is Dominican, and he is one of those salsa icons. So we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful
And it's free.
afternoon.
It's free. It's
Yes.
fantastic.
And we
It's
have a kids
fantastic.
zone. We have
The
activities
food,
for children,
yeah.
food, vendors, arts
It's
and
amazing.
crafts. It's a lot of fun.
Juan, I asked you before when you were over there, so now that you're back over here, tell us who's in this band. You're going to play for us in just another couple of minutes.
Well, the musicians that are playing with me in this occasion are the main singer, Rafael Moreno from Panama. Well, right now he has the Quattro, so...
Yeah.
The flute player is called Jailin Rivera from Puerto Rico also,
Yay!
from Santurce. We have in the congas David Antonio, also from Puerto Rico. And in the bass, Andres Escalona from Colombia. But we're going to have, tomorrow is a big concert. It's the whole orchestra, 10 players, different countries, and we're all playing music.
I just have to tell you, I can't even imagine how that's going to sound with the full orchestra. It's so, even with the stripped down group that you have here, it is so smooth. And my father played bass in Cape Verdean trio, right? Just all Cape Verdean music. Taught me how to pick out the bass line of any song, anytime. I went right to the bass. Your bass player, I mean, it was fire. Your bass player is fire. The addition of the flute, Honestly, I just want to tell you, I think it, and the mixture, I can hear every single influence in that music, every single one. But let's talk about the Quattro, because you were basically born with a Quattro in your hand.
We can say it like that.
You
yeah.
play it like it's part of your body. It's so natural. So tell people how long you've been playing it, and tell them what a Quattro is.
Well, the Quattro is the instrument that, my Rafael is holding right now. It's a 5-string, double-string instrument, which is 10 strings in total. That's Puerto Rico's national instrument. And I've been playing it since I was 4 years old because of my father. My father was my first teacher. So he taught me the first few songs. And so I've been playing it for 24 years right now. And lately, with my instrument and my folklore music, I have traveled more than 15 countries around the globe just playing folkloric music, salsa, the music from the mountains, that we call it seises and aguinaldos. I have also played plena, salsa, bomba, a little bit of it, everything. So basically tomorrow I'm gonna be performing all that. Plena, bomba, salsa, folkloric music, like a mix of Cuban song also. So it's a little bit of everything.
Okay, so before go over there and get ready to go play again, and then
Get another song.
Another song, and Vanessa's going to tell us. You go to ibaboston.org, and you will see a full array of what's available for free, as Andrea pointed out. Anything else you want to highlight before they start playing again?
I hope everyone will join us. The weather is going to be great. Again, this is the 50th anniversary. It's a big year, and again, it's just another way that we build community, not just share our culture. So I hope people will join us. It's going to be great.
So what's the name of this song?
Oh, this next song is called Improvisador, written by a Cuban composer, Mary Gauthier, arranged by Paul Feliciano and myself.
Improvisador, the improviser for...
It's honor and tribute to the improvisers around the globe, mostly Latin people. We call it trabajadores in Puerto Rico and payadores in every other country. So it goes like this.
Vine a la vida escuchando cantar a mis viejos, viejos que me presentaron el arte rural. Y aunque adolescente fui blanco de absurdos complejos, la décima siempre fue parte esencial de mi hogar. No hay discoteca mejor que mis viejas parrandas. No hay un poema que en algo pueda superar al verso espontáneo y sencillo que solo se canta cuando alma y cerebro se van el misterio a explorar. Improvisador, mago sin sombrero y sin mangas, con palomas de palabras, sin más truco que darle a todo color. Improvisador, casi siempre tan incomprendido que le cierran los oídos a tu voz, a tu voz. Me duele cuando la mordida de la indiferencia te deja las marcas que pocos te pueden sanar. Hagamos murallas de aquellos de vasta experiencia y de esos que salen sin miedo el camino a explorar. Improvisador, mago sin sombrero y sin mangas, con palomas de palabras, sin más truco que darle a todo color. Improvisador, casi siempre tan incomprendido que le cierran los oídos a tu voz, a tu voz. can dance if you want, okay?
Improvisador, en cada verso, dejando el corazón.
Desde pequeño aprendí a apreciar la cultura y el folclore.
Improvisador, en cada verso, dejando el corazón.
Tengo un nombre y apellido que me sabe a tradición.
Dejando el corazón. Dejando el corazón. Dejando el corazón. Dejando el corazón. Dejando el corazón.
Hey! So
was-
good.
Yeah, that
So
was
good.
Juan Nieves. He's going to be the opening performer. He and his orchestra at the Festival of Betances this weekend. And as we said before, go to ibaboston.org. That's, I said it wrong. It's IBA, but we're going to spell it. ibaboston.org.
That's correct.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for coming in.
much.
That was such
Thank
a
you.
fantastic treat.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
both for being here.
After the new news, we've got Callie Crossley from our own GBH, and you're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 WGBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I am Marjorie Egan. I'm joined today by Andrea Cabral, the former sheriff of Suffolk County. Jim Browdy is on vacation. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library as we do every Tuesday and every Friday. And I'm happy to report that youtube.com is working again in terms of GBH News. So we're streaming both on facebook.com/GBH News and once again on youtube.com/GBH News. And joining us right now in the Boston Public Library hot seat is GBH's Callie Crossley. She's the host of Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, which you can catch Sunday nights right here on 89.7 at 6 o'clock. She's also the host of Basic Black, which airs Fridays at 7:30. And you can hear Callie's Callie commentaries on Mondays for GBH's Morning Edition. Hi, Callie.
Hello.
Hello, Callie.
Hello, Andrea. Okay, so we've got a bunch of hot topics to discuss with you. So let's start. Let's jump right into the fire. Let's start with the way that the Supreme Court's disgusting affirmative action ruling is having an impact on scholarships. And Marjorie and I were kind of having this discussion a little bit earlier about the ruling goes to the admissions process. How did it sort of just kind of, narrowly. How did it suddenly just kind of ooze into and meld into the funding process, the tuition process, and the scholarship process? Because that is in equal danger, in my view.
Oh, it is definitely an equal danger. We can say that in Missouri, the Attorney General has stopped what he describes as race-based scholarships. The guy in Kentucky says he's going to think about it, and in Wisconsin, there may be legislation that says that. Again, to underscore, the court case narrowly focuses on admissions, but what everybody knew is that there's going to be all of these tangential offshoots that are going to eventually lead back to the court because people are going to, make a case and go back. And certainly this is going to be one. Because the other part of this is that if you, as all of the experts who are trying to figure out where other ways to try to blunt the impact of not being able to use race as a factor, remember it wasn't the only factor, just a factor in admissions, was certainly through making certain that there were some scholarships, some tuition support for these students who otherwise would not have that. Now you're taking away this foundation, and this becomes very, 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 very serious because as a young man who was interviewed in this particular piece in USA Today said, I wouldn't have been at any of these schools had I not had an opportunity for a scholarship. And I think I want to just say this about scholarships. There are all kinds of scholarships out there. My sister works for a philanthropic organization, and she would say to me there are all these scholarships that would go wanting because somebody would set up a scholarship for somebody who wears red on Tuesdays. And if you wore red on Tuesdays, you'd apply. But who would think to apply to that?
Right.
Okay. So there are very specific kinds of terms in many of the scholarships, but the focusing on the race is, of course, is going to be a serious blow in terms of there's not going to be any maintaining of whatever the diversity levels were at certain schools, but certainly trying to blunt the impact, at least with being able to offer some students this. It's really devastating.
We should mention Charles Barkley, my favorite commentator during the NCAA NBA finals, I should say. And I think he does a little bit of the college stuff too, maybe not, but he's great in the NBA finals. He's made in his will $5 million available when he departs this mortal coil for black kids' scholarships. But you know what you can't
He just revised his will to include that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And those are private scholarships.
Yes.
A person doing that can, like, as Callie says, if you wear red on Tuesday, you can be eligible.
Yeah.
But you know what you can't help noticing in this reporting post the affirmative action decision from the Supreme Court is the glee almost with people saying, okay, that's it, we're cutting down, immediately.
Yeah.
It's really reminiscent of the voting rights 2013 when Chief Justice Roberts said there was no need for any kind of voting rights protection because we don't really have those problems anymore in the United States of America. And the glee and the speed with which
the next day.
Yeah, the next day. I mean, it's kind of like that.
Well, we should change the language around it. And that, Callie and I just had a few minutes to talk about that before the segment started. We should stop talking about it in terms of DEI versus no DEI or race neutral or colorblind. This is the elevation and the sustaining of white supremacy.
Yes.
There is no other reason that you would care at all about inclusion. If you look at the actual statistics, the percentages of people who are Asian, Black, Latino in these colleges, they are minuscule.
Yeah.
The overwhelming 40%, upwards of 40% in each of the schools, with the exception perhaps of an HCBU, right? HBCU, sorry. Those are the percentages that you're looking at. So how can you be so laser focused on that small percentage that you're saying that even they shouldn't be given any consideration because you want it to be and remain not just predominantly white, but almost exclusively white?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So it'll end up in the courts again, and it'll wind its way back to the Supreme Court eventually.
Well, I just want to throw in, because we talked about this earlier in the week, that when you look at who legacy admissions are, they're almost all white kids.
Yeah.
And you look at, this surprised me because I thought there was more of diversity in the athletic scholarships, but you look at Harvard, I guess they've got teams like fencing and sailing and skiing and crew and golf, things that if you are not near a golf course or swimming pool, or you're a poor kid, you're just not going to have access to those sports. So you may have a chance, playing a different sport like football, which takes a lot of kids. But most of these athletic scholarships go to white kids.
Well, remember, this was aimed at elite schools, with Harvard standing in for the elite schools. And interestingly enough, the court really didn't focus on the public school, which was the University of North Carolina, in any kind of specific way. Just said, the same thing applies. Well, but a public institution is very different,
right?
And so
they made no
That's right. So that's a mess right there. So that's going to end up in court again because it's not clear. But what do you mean over here? Because it's not the same thing.
And that's also how you know what their overriding concern was to just simply sort of eliminate it.
Right.
And the same thing with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act stuff. It was just to eliminate it. So that's going to make us, sort of swing into this next story.
This is incredible.
It is, and I'm going to leave it to you, Callie, to give us, the explanation so that people can really kind of understand what happened. But this Texas A&M recruited a University of Texas professor, and this was essentially initially about journalism. Tell us what it morphed into.
So Kathleen McElroy, there might not be a name that other people know, but she's an esteemed journalist, not just a journalist. She heads the University of Texas at Austin's program. She is tenured, been tenured there forever. Highly regarded, both in the industry. She worked at the New York Times, many other prestigious institutions prior to going into professorshipism, to academic work, and was excited when she was reached out to. She did not reach out. She was reached out to, just to be clear, by Texas A&M University. That's where she graduated from. She's a proud Aggie, as she said. And they wanted to revive their journalism program. It had died. And they thought, well, we need to get somebody who's a heavy hitter who could come in and revive it. So the chancellor, I think, and then the person underneath the chancellor reached out to her. Maybe it's the president and the chancellor. And so she was very excited. I'm going to go back to my, alma mater. This is great. They were so excited about her coming. They had a big ceremony. One of the reporters described it as the kind of signing ceremony you would have for an athlete, a star athlete. That was how big a deal it was. And she had a great contract and tenure. I don't need to tell everybody here that tenure is very important.
Yes.
As part of her contract.
And she had tenure at UT.
Right. So she's now coming with tenure, bringing her tenure or getting a tenure at Texas A&M. Well, some people on the board decided, well, I don't know if we like that, because if we look at her work, she's been a big proponent of, again, DEI, and she's covered race in her long career as a journalist. So I don't know. And Texas has just passed a law that said you can't talk about certain things, akin to what we've heard about in some elementary schools. You can't talk about certain kinds of history. So now they got a law that says you can't talk about DEI. But as Andrea has just said, that's a broad statement that covers whatever. Now, I just want to ask the question is, how would she, according to their definition, not talk about DEI if her lived experience is DEI? I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. So anyway, so they decided rather to not only attack her stellar record and all of her stellar credentials, but then they decided that they would renege on the original contract and offer her less than. And I'm saying I was surprised that she even considered less than, because they came back and said, well, maybe we can get away from not dealing with the board if we just do a 5-year professor of the practice. You won't have tenure, but by that time, if you've been here 5 years, everybody will see it's all great, and then probably you'll get it back again. And she actually was considering that, was good. And then they said, no, that's too much. We're going to take that back. And what we will offer you is no tenure, a contract at will, meaning at any point we can get rid of you for anything. So she could have walked down the hall and I guess whispered DEI and be fired the next day. And that's what they left her with. So it went from a public signing ceremony and great, hoopla about this woman and her credentials coming, to this insulting thing behind the scenes, which, to her credit, she released all the letters to the public so people could see how she was treated. And she said, I feel damaged by this entire process, which she should feel damaged because she's not the one. She said, and it seems that my being an Aggie, wanting to lead an Aggie program to what I thought would be prosperity, wasn't enough. So it's horrible, disgusting, and I don't even,
It's just so blatant. I mean, it's just like you just said.
They're not hiding it.
They're just saying, hey, as you said before, this is about a white supremacist.
Yeah.
We're not going to have any kind of discussion of anything having to do with race. And we should play a little clip from Roland S. Martin. I think I saw him once at one of the conventions. He was broadcasting from down there. He's a journalist. Here's a clip of him. He is calling on black athletes to boycott Texas A&M over their treatment of this woman, this esteemed journalist and professor, Kathleen O. McElroy. Here he is.
And so what? All of a sudden, they had a problem because she did stories on race and diversity at the New York Times. They have a problem because her master's thesis dealt with civil rights leaders. So really, that's what the issue is. This right here, folks, is a serious problem. And it goes to show you how feckless, how weak, how trifling, how childish, and how impotent this Board of Regents is.
I don't have a lot of great faith in boycotts, though. I mean, it seems like they last for a couple of days and then people go back to their old ways. I don't know.
Well, I think,
unless it's the Montgomery boycott that went on for a year, but that's
that was a true boycott.
Yeah.
But I think also this is the message sending. I mean, she's the mechanism,
right?
But this is their way of saying, we're going to skip right over the discussion of establishing an office for diversity and inclusion, because we're clearly not going to do that. Now, if we think that your work might even touch on that, or that you might possibly have that as part of your curriculum, we're going to make it so that you can't get a job here. And I think that we need to be focusing on the messages that they're sending that way, the same message that gets sent when the AG the next day after a Supreme Court, it usually takes an AG's office at least a couple of weeks to digest a decision. Here you have AGs going, the scholarships, everything's out. Why don't we identify who these people are on the Board of Regents? Because putting a face to it, to your point, Marjorie, about boycotts, that people forget about them. We don't put a face to it. Will you notice if there's a story about someone being unfairly targeted by a police officer or beaten or somehow injured, you will have 5 pictures of the victim.
Right.
You will not have a picture of the police officer. It is a protectionist thing.
But I will say that if you continue with Roland's thing, he put up a picture of all of the Board of Regents and said, here they are.
Why aren't they in every newspaper accompanying this story? It's great to have a picture of her, but why don't you tell us this sort of, people feel comfortable not pushing back when the perpetrators are a nameless, faceless mob. If you can't identify them, so why doesn't that happen? Why in journalism rooms, newsrooms, why isn't it happening?
I don't know, but he did it. So that's
Yeah, I think
for
it
sure.
will.
Yeah.
I think it will. Now that he's identified. This story was only July 11th, so I mean it's a few days old, but maybe.
And by the way, Roland is an Aggie graduate, and he said, "Oh, all my donations have stopped." as of
Yeah,
this moment."
that's keeping
yeah,
the donations.
that might get
Yep.
their attention
Right,
even
right.
faster. So this is an awkward transition here, but it's some good news. And we think of Callie as our kind of Sue O'Connell's our media maven. We think of Callie as our chef maven. I mean, she knows everything about food, the preparation of, and all that. She's the deviled egg queen here at GBH. I don't know if you knew that, Andrea.
No, you have to have serious skills. That's the kind of thing that you do not bring to a cookout and have it go wrong.
No.
You will
correct.
never be invited back.
That's correct.
My deviled eggs with Cane's mayonnaise did not get far in the contest. But anyway, let's talk about this development at Top Chef with a woman who spent a lot of her career here in Boston.
Kristen Kish.
Yes.
I follow Food Network's Top Chef religiously. I've been following it since it began, and she was a rising star. She came from here. She was working with Barbara Lynch at Minton.
Her signature, like
yes,
snazzy, fancy dancy
very
restaurant,
delicious
right?
place. If people haven't gone, it's quite delicious. And encouraged not only Kristen, but another of her chefs to apply for Top Chef, and Kristen eventually won. And at one point in the competition, what made her victory so interesting is that she literally got kicked out, and they have something called Last Chance Kitchen, so you can go and fight your way back in, and you have to beat everybody else that got kicked out. She beat everybody else and came back in, then beat the rest of them and won. So she's very, 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 very good. And since then, she's been judging various contests. She's been hanging out with the family at Food Network, Never Too Far. And it's a real important role for her to take over as host of the show, because Padma just stepped down, and Padma was fabulous after 20 years at the helm there. I think she'll do well. What I loved about Padma Lakshmi, who was the host of Top Chef before this, is that she pretty much had knowledge of every cuisine.
Yeah.
She had a palate that was so broad, so that when she said something's a little off here, you knew.
Right.
She knew
Right.
it was off. I think Kristen Kish is close to that, but I'm not sure. I know she's very, very, very good. And she's also a kind, from what I've seen on the show, she's not mean to people when stuff is messed up.
Yes.
She doesn't say, I used to do that in the first year of culinary school. What is this?
Right.
Okay, we're going to ask our listeners about this later on. So your opinion on this is key here, Callie Crossley.
Yes.
This story about this waitress who took a little video of the difference between how boomers, that's my generation, born between 46 and 64, and Gen Zs, the younger generation that are in their 20s, I guess now, right, for the most part, teens to 20s, how they leave their tables after they get up from their table.
This was very interesting to me, because this is not my experience. So she took a video, but so we can see it, she didn't make it up. And she wanted us to see, this is how the baby boomers left their table. So they left with their dishes, on the table like you would, you finish eating. And she said, and this is how the Gen Zers, and they had stacked all their dishes and, scraped all the extra food like you would at somebody's house. And she said, this is just the difference. And so there's a whole, discussion about, this is what baby boomers are accustomed to. They're not being rude, but they assume that's your job. You come to. Then the other part of it was that the Gen Zers feel like they're more compassionate because they're likely to have those jobs, and so they know it's so tough, so they straighten out the plates.
Are you buying it?
No, because I'm telling you, I'm just saying that, I thought McDonald's had trained all of us to take our stuff up and throw it out.
Yeah.
Really, seriously. Pretty much. So a lot of these restaurants I go to, I see everybody cross generations.
Yeah, coffee shops too.
Yeah, I don't see, now, there are some piggy people, come on, we know that. But as a rule, I had not seen this. I'm going to pay attention now.
Yeah, I'm not sure I buy it either. But anyway, let's hear from the waitress, or I shouldn't say waitress, the wait server herself, talking about the difference between boomers and Gen Z on this TikTok video, which shows, as you said, this table covered with dirty plates and another one neatly stacked. Here's Kate.
Kate, here's all I'm saying. This is a table of 5 boomers that I took some plates out of the way already, okay? And then this is a table of 6 Gen Zs. They did that. Just saying.
And then she lost her job right after she
Yeah, well,
resigned her job after the video.
Well, she quit.
The
Yeah.
corporate people didn't appreciate her talking about it. But,
Yeah.
but you can understand. But
I'm with Callie. I kind of I stack everything up.
Yeah.
No, I haven't. But and I think this was sort of like, all these little social experiments that end up on TikTok because somebody takes a video. It kind of was, sort of that kind of thing, sort of in search of a story.
Yeah.
Let's compare two generations, because I think you probably see a little bit of each thing in both generations.
Yeah.
Nobody even mentioned Generation X, which falls in the middle.
Yeah,
I guess
I know.
they're apparently
What
not
about-
eating out at all,
Exactly.
so there's no reason to even talk about them.
you know what else I want to know? I want her to tell me what her tip was like for each of those groups.
Now that is a really, really, really good point. So listen, what have you got coming up on your show?
I have two great stories. We're talking about food forests. I don't know about all of you, but I never heard of a food forest
Neither did I.
a few months ago. It's international food movement, and it's spreading across the United States. There are 10 in Boston, and they're different from community gardens. Community gardens, you have your own little plot. You do your vegetables. You might be out there together as a community and doing it. But a food forest is that you literally clear a space. Built in all of the food stuff that you want in there, maybe the trees, the this, the that. You try to pay attention to what's happening in your area already, so you're not bringing in invasive species, stuff that will be. And then it's free to anybody. So when we were talking to the Edgewater Neighborhood Association head, she said, we discovered we had walnut trees. And she said, I had those when I grew up in the South. So, we worked around the walnut trees, and, somebody in another one planted blueberry bushes. And so you get them going. People agree to come in and, do a little pruning and a little upkeep on it. It's also in the city a great place for refuge from sun. So there's shaded spaces too.
This is amazing.
And it's just fantastic. I mean, and it's just, there's a coalition of Boston Coalition for Food Forests. It's just wonderful. So they hope to have 30 more at the end of the decade.
Great.
So we're doing that. And then, of course, me, I'm going to have to do pop culture. So we're taking a deep dive into the whole cultural phenomenon of Barbiecore and what's happening, because the movie's coming out next week. And so we've got a woman who has collected so much Barbie stuff you cannot believe. And by the way, these are adults. We're talking about, this is an adult phenomenon response. Another young woman from Boston who runs an event planning company who put together a Barbie cruise, and 600 people came. Dressed and sang all the songs and did everything. Yes, they did. Yes.
This is kind of like the Taylor Swift thing, isn't it? Where people are just going bananas over something.
It's deeper than that. I mean, it is really serious. People, Barbie's signature paint color has been sold out for months. I don't know if you knew that.
Well, they said they ran out of paint because there was so much pink paint used in the movie by Greta Gerwig.
But that's not it. No, people have been buying it in other, it's out because people have bought it out. It is out. People have been visiting the real life size Barbie Malibu house. I mean, it's a huge thing. So we're talking a cultural phenomenon.
I had no idea.
That is, yes, it's huge. There's a whole movement called Barbiecore. Get with it, people.
Well, what I thought was interesting in a story I read, that as part of it is about people's childhoods. If they played with
the
Barbies,
nostalgia of it.
and they had the Skipper, and they had the Ken, and they had the Malibu house, and it's a nostalgic thing.
But it's more than that, because some people didn't play with it and they just not into it.
This sounds real.
This is a really interesting cultural phenomenon.
Okay.
Well, thank you for all of it today, Callie. Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Callie Crossley. She is the host of Under the Radar with Callie Crossley. You can watch it Sunday nights right here on 89.7 at 6 o'clock. She is also the host of Basic Black, which airs Fridays at 7:30. You can hear her Callie commentaries Mondays on GBH's Morning Edition. After a quick break, Michael Curry from the NAACP and the Mass League of Community Health Centers is with us, a few weeks out from the National NAACP Convention making its way to Boston. We'll talk about that, plus the FDA's approval of an over-the-counter birth control pill, finally, and other stories. Michael's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We were chatting off mic, which we shouldn't have been doing, but we were. So we are back, and we are joined by Michael Curry. He's the president and CEO of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers. He's also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors, where he chairs the board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. And we're very excited because the convention is coming. Yeah.
Yes.
It's just the end of July, and it's going to be a very big deal here in Boston.
Absolutely.
Michael, it's always good to see you. Always, always, always. And I don't think people understand what a long time in coming it was to get it here, and more particularly, what you did along with Mayor Walsh to get it here. So let's give people, because there was intervening COVID and after there was some initial planning. Tell people about this journey and how and what happened along the way.
So one, I think it's an important place to start is the history of the NAACP and this movement and the integral part Boston has played in the national movement. So when you think about the NAACP National started 1908, there was a Springfield race riot in Springfield, Illinois, the birthplace of Abraham Lincoln, supposedly the great emancipator. 2 black men were accused of attacks on white women. When the townsfolk found out about the alleged attacks, they marched on the jail, thousands, and wanted to lynch those 2 black men. That went on for days. Black citizens were murdered. I think it's still identified as one of the largest numbers of white citizens murdered in a race riot, many of them being defenders of those black families as well. As a result, that story got out across the country. William English Walling, a writer, wrote an article called Race War in the North. That article was spread, and folks like Mary Ovington, one of the founders of the NAACP, read that article. Other white citizens, black citizens, you got to remember that Ida B. Wells was very prominent in the movement at that time. W.B. Du Bois was prominent in fighting separately in other tracks like the Niagara movement. And that led to a convergence of those 2 movements to create what they call the National Negro Committee. So I say that to as a precursor to answer your question, that the founding of this movement were Bostonians. They were the third meeting of the Niagara movement was here in Boston. It was the first meeting they allowed black women to participate. That was the black male-led movement. And then you had the National Negro Committee of 40 met here in Boston as well, I think their third meeting. And they started really relying on Boston talent to lead that movement. Butler Wilson, black lawyer, Butler Wilson, Clement Morgan were 2 prominent black attorneys. The first president of the National NAACP in 1909 was also the Boston branch president, a white Roxbury lawyer. Wow. People don't know that history.
I didn't know that.
Moorfield story. So long story short, 1911 first convention here in Boston of the National Convention, second convention of the organization. 1950 met here, and Park Street Church is a central place that the first convention was held at, so there's a lot of history here. The bylaws of the National NAACP were founded on the Boston branch's bylaws because we had already started developing our stuff here early. Many of the founders, when you think William Monroe Trotter, who many people don't know Boston history. Trotter was a giant in the movement, led 10,000 people just down the street to shut down Birth of a Nation in 1915. We don't know that history. So this convention becomes an opportunity to revisit that history. That's why I presented it to the National NAACP. Right. I was at a board meeting. I've been on the board since 2014. I said, if Nashville fell through, let's do Boston. I text Mayor Walsh and said, Mayor Walsh, can we get the convention in Boston? Can we make it happen? He was excited. He called Gibbons over at the convention center, and Tanisha got pulled in, and eventually it was on and developing to be a convention here. The sticking point was the hotel rooms. Unlike any other convention you go to, where there are business people and you can pay $300-400 a night for a hotel, this is common everyday folk like my mother.
Yeah.
They're coming by car, bus, train to the convention. They can't do that. So you have to go to cities that can have a price point of about $200, which is impossible in Boston, by the way.
Impossible.
So we had to find a solution for that, and we did.
What was the solution? You have a makeup of the money, right?
So we were going to say no to the convention, and Mayor called me and said, Mike, we can't get to that price point. And Michael, we know because we had advocated for this convention to come many years when I was Boston branch president. And I had an idea, and I said, Mayor, why don't we try to create a fund, and that fund will offset the price of the hotels for those delegates that are coming. Again, salt of the earth, people, Main Street folks. And he thought it was a great idea, and that idea was born, and now we have a convention coming.
And part of the reason that we thought this was so important is because, history is under siege. The teaching of history is under siege right now across the country. And this convention, to the point that you made just beautifully just now, presents an opportunity to bring all of that history to the fore. And to say, and in 2023, our Vice President, Kamala Harris, is at the convention. You've got Bob Kraft, Meek Mill, and others talking about what to many people seems like a new thing. Should Black and Jewish communities combine in 2023 to stamp out racism and anti-Semitism? No, that history goes way, way, way back. So talk a little bit about the goals of the convention with regard to making everything old new again.
Yeah, so one is, and I've said it on this show many times, we are so lacking of history, which is why we tie ourselves in knots about affirmative action and reparations and justice and criminal justice, because we don't know the truth. And part of that, as you mentioned, even the Jewish-Black relationship, Kivy Kaplan, giant in Massachusetts, a philanthropist, was the first, one of the few New England people to serve on the national board before me. People don't know that. He was a friend of Dr. King's, marched with Dr. King. So I have the honor of being the first person since Kivy Kaplan and Tuskegee's Airman Vernon Sport to be from New England and serve on the board.
Wow.
So I share that story. We honored Kivy Kaplan's family when I was president to tell that story about the Black-Jewish Alliance. And I marched in a march from Selma to DC, and I marched with my Jewish colleagues. So one is we need to tell that story. Two is the reality is if we know the beginning well, the end won't trouble us. That's the African proverb. We don't know the beginning well. Right. So knowing the beginning well is knowing about the history of this country, knowing about the history of this city. If we want to understand why Boston is viewed as a racist city, and it is today, travel the country. I always tell people, know your hallway reputation. go to Chicago, DC, LA, Texas, and say Boston. They'll say, oh, that's a racist city. I challenge that sometimes. I say, well, every city's racist, just looks different, right? Because I feel the same thing when I'm in Houston or when I'm in Miami or LA. The difference is we do have you could walk to an area like Copley and feel like you don't belong. They'll look at you different. Yeah. Andrea, you and I would appreciate, we used to have this thing here called Friendly Takeover, with First Fridays used to do. And we would just pick a spot, a bar, a restaurant, and tell all Black people in Boston, just come to the restaurant. When I tell you, you would see people get nervous. The wait staff would get, they'd say, are you from out of town? Because if you come to Boston and you're visiting. Is there a convention? Right. Because when you go to Copley, Cleveland Circle, name it, Coolidge Corner, you don't see Black people. You go to downtown Boston, you don't see Black people.
Or where the convention is going to be.
Or the Seaport area.
Exactly.
What that says to me, having been a born and bred Bostonian, is we haven't been welcomed in those places. It's not just about prices, because we pay money, we spend money, we have a buying power. It's about whether the waitress treats you the same. It's about whether the bar owner or restaurant owner will rent the spot to you to do an event there. There's a racism here that's always been here. Let's face it, let's deal with it, and understand that we've not always been inclusive.
Let me ask you a stupid question. You always talk about the history that we don't know, and you're always right, we don't know it, or at least I don't know it. If somebody wants to go look at the history, is there some book or some place besides going to NAACP Wikipedia that you can go to look at where this stuff you're talking about, the Boston connections? Yes, it's so much. I told you and Jim before, I do a presentation across the country called Quantum Leap, where I walk through history from 1619 to 2023, and I'm constantly, as the TV show, jumping back and forth in time. And in the mix of doing that presentation, and I'm literally jumping through time, right? Slavery, what did a slave cost? What was the institution of slavery? What institutions benefited from slavery? Banks, insurance companies, to what was Birth of a Nation, to what was Homestead Act, the Southern Homestead Act, to the GI Bill, to the housing discrimination. And then I give them a list of books to read. Okay. So one of The Color of Wealth. I teach it in New England Law, Boston, just down the street in a diversity inclusion class. I have all my students read The Color of Law. Color of Law. I have them read Caste. Mm-hmm. Or Warmth of Other Suns, right? I have them read a mix of books that gives them context. In terms of Boston, there's pieces of it. There's one book, and about capitalism, and it talks about Massachusetts and how we sort of credit ourselves for being one of the states that ended slavery way before slavery was ended across the country, when in fact we benefited on slavery through the end of slavery.
cotton, right? So this book that talks about the capitalism and how Massachusetts gained its wealth, how the country gained its wealth off of millions of slaves, which was really driving this economy for centuries. It's just fascinating. We need to be comfortable enough to dig in on that history and stop saying, oh yeah, I've heard about I know slavery was bad.
Yeah.
Because when you study it, then you'll understand the wealth gap. When you study it, you'll understand why people are asking for reparations.
Right. And see, here's that's the other part about sort of the historical Black and Jewish alliance around this stuff. The program Facing History and Ourselves.
Yes.
It made a generational impact.
Yes.
And that was, a great deal of that was talking about facing the history of anti-Semitism. And when you have something like that is embraced, that makes people uncomfortable, what you end up with are generations of people who learned through that program, who then passed that learning down. And that's part of what's been elusive. We put slavery in very summary terms. Oh yes, slavery was bad, but that's not who we are now, let's move on. We need a Facing History in Ourselves that people embrace to the same degree.
Understanding that there are vestiges to slavery.
Exactly, that
Black
do not
codes,
exist.
Jim Crow, institutional racism. So no matter what industry you're in, no matter what neighborhood you're in, if you want to see it, and if you open your eyes, right, you'll see it.
Right. So we're gonna pivot now to.
Yes, we are.
This is my big giant about time story. So the FDA approved an over-the-counter birth control bill 40 years too late. But tell us a little bit about that and what the impact that this is going to have on accessibility.
So one, just acknowledging the difficult times we're in after Supreme Court decisions that has upended settled law. And we're reeling, understanding that elections have consequences and we are losing ground. Roe v. Wade, affirmative action, and we're just getting started with this Supreme Court. But we know that one of the things that has always been challenged is access to contraceptive medicines. When you have to get a prescription, you have to go to a provider. We know that there are access barriers. Some people don't have a primary care provider. Many of us in the country have gone without primary care providers. We're good in Massachusetts for the most part because we're 97, 98% insured. We did that in Chapter 58 in 2006. But a lot of the rest of the country is still uninsured or underinsured, which means that this contraception issue matters. And when we think about contraception generally, it is a large number of unexpected, unwanted births. And if we understand that one of the ways to address that is the use of contraception, then we have to make that accessible and not a challenge to get it. And I think this new medication, Opal, is a vehicle to get there. I think all the medical associations, the advocates have asked for it, the women's advocacy groups, and now we're at a place that people can walk in and access the medicine. The challenge will be whether they can afford it. And that's what.
Do we know what it's going to cost?
We don't. As far as we know now, I think $15 to $30, which a general contraception will cost. But because this is being moved to available in your pharmacy or wherever you go, and it's not by prescription, there's a chance that the manufacturer might try to elevate the price, which then means that, of course, the disparity plays out again, right? People who are poorer may not have access to it. So that'll have to be worked out as well. Having been part of a health equity compact, and we have these conversations all the time, cost is a barrier to care. And if we care about people getting high quality care, then we got to solve for the cost issue. I teach a health policy course as well at Suffolk University. I always say the iron triangle. We call it cost, access, and quality. If we don't solve that triangle, cost, access, and quality, we run into a problem in our healthcare system.
We're talking to Michael Curry, President, CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers and a member of the NAACP, National NAACP Board of Directors. You know, I just wonder, you guys are both lawyers, I'm not a lawyer, but people that are anti-abortion went after mifepristone, one of the pills that you can take to induce an abortion very early after conception. Is there an expectation that the people who are anti-abortion are going to be going after, because a lot of those people are also anti-contraception, which is incredible.
Or pro-forced birth or pro-control of women's bodies, which is really the bottom line.
I mean, but I don't know enough about the law here. Is there a option for these people to try to get rid of a medication?
So, and Andrew, you know this even better than I do. I think, I always say this is chess, not checkers. Right? Yeah. right? And they're winning the game.
Yeah.
They're winning the game because they set the table with the Supreme Court. So in this process, one is always, of course, and I think I've said this on this show before, they're splitting some decisions because the things that they're willing to let go of, because they have the big apples that they want to go after, like affirmative action, Roe v. Wade, and the others. That's my opinion of the court. However, I think that they also have this cascade of things they want to go after. And Clarence Thomas, the worst among them, has already intimated that he'd like to go after some other areas, including birth control. Yeah. So let's not be surprised. They have the numbers. There is a will of the court to do it. And all they will wait is for the cases to come up through the system. And they'll pick those cases that they want to upend, settle law, and women's rights, and voting rights, and access, diversity, and inclusion. They're waiting for it. This is, I always say, the bait and switch. They made people think that Bernie Sanders was so crazy, and the liberal left, look at those crazy folks wanted to do it. And then behind the whole scene was a far right that was actually had a real crazy agenda that we ignored.
It's always astounding to me how, for some reason, year after year, decade after decade, Democrats don't get that and learn how to play the game of chess the way it's being played. They're always surprised. It's like, what do you mean checkmate? It's like, well, we've been at the board for 50 years. What about us did you not see? No, it is. It's amazing.
Do you think that Democrats get it now? I mean, is there a Federalist Society being built from the Democrat? Yeah, I don't think so
Well,
either.
with all my Democratic friends and the Democratic Party and all the other folks, I always think back, and I referenced before, our good friend, Deval Patrick, who told the party to grow a backbone at the convention that year. I think it was 2004. The reality is that it is chess, and if you don't anticipate what's coming, now the conversation around the size of the court becomes chess, right? Because this has a multi-generational impact of this court.
Right.
The decisions could go on for years,
and they will go on for years.
And they will go. And I'd say the demographics have changed. Public opinion has changed, and when decisions start to counter public opinion, then you know you're in trouble.
Right, because you're well on your way to authoritarianism, fascism, minority rule at a minimum. But that's why, I think Biden is so misguided on expanding the court. They are not playing by Marquis of Queensberry rules. So you can come to the table with all the politeness, and we can cajole and convince people by virtue of reason. But you can't. You can't know who's after you. I'm like, not knowing your enemy is a huge problem, or constantly imbuing your enemy with qualities they do not have and are clear with you that they do not have them. It's not like they're pretending to be something other. Like we keep saying they're not hiding it. They're not pretending. They're telling you who they are. You're just kind of want to think things will all work out. And they're not going to all work out.
As much as all of us that supported and voted for President Biden appreciate that we could have had another alternative.
Right, absolutely. It doesn't. What I'm saying doesn't diminish his accomplishments.
And that he's done some pretty significant things, historic things since he's been president. The reality is I think I agree with you that we've been looking, particularly Black Americans, but I think other marginalized groups have been looking for a tougher president. To play chess tougher.
And a tougher AG.
And a tougher AG, because ultimately being conciliatory, trying to keep the peace in this situation is causing us to lose ground. So if expanding the court is an option, I think 4 months ago most folks didn't even want to talk about it, but now Roe v. Wade, affirmative action. I will just say this just quick piece because we've said it before. If you believe, and you're listening to the show, and you believe that the demographics of our higher eds, and particularly the elite schools that are white, is that way because you're smarter, you're brighter, you're more prepared, you are inherently more capable, that's inherently racist.
Right.
Because there's brilliant Black people, there's brilliant brown people who belong in those seats as well. And historically, we've steered them and denied them access in the pipeline, the pathway to get there. That's what affirmative action is and was. And we will now see, as we saw in California, precipitous decline in admission, matriculation, graduation.
And that's the proof of the first part of what you said.
And we need, and I say this all the time, so we get out of this sort of tribal thing. That little Black girl that's meant to be brilliant and do something phenomenal benefits us all, not just Black folks.
Right.
So if she finds a cure for cancer, you need her to get to Harvard or MIT too. We don't think that way.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, because we are running out of time.
Right.
I wanted to ask you again about the convention. It's been everything I read about the convention. This is for everybody.
Yes.
And talk about that. It's not just everybody's African American, everybody's black. It's for everybody.
So one, it's a phenomenal time to come to a convention and see all these political movers and shakers. I remember my first convention, 1999, 2000. I ran into Maxine Waters, right? I've been a fan of Maxine. I got a chance to talk to her in the hallway. Al Sharpton was there. I got a chance to go see him speak in a small room. I got to see all these elected officials, governors, mayors from all over the country come into the convention. It was my first one, and I've been to them since that time. It's for everyone. This is a place where we get into a dialogue throughout the course of the week. There's going to be panel discussion, work groups, sessions, material handed out, a chance to engage people in the hallways. You're going to see some of the most dynamic youth, black and brown youth, particularly black youth, that you've ever seen in the country who are coming here to compete in a program we call ACTSO, the Academic, Cultural, Technological, Scientific Olympics of the Mind. They're culinary, they're engineers, they're computer scientists. I talked about talent, that little black girl. We won the gold when I was president. A young man, Adrian, won the gold medal nationally for building his own Segway.
Oh.
Another young man won the gold when I was president. He built his own smartwatch. So to my point about brilliance and talent, that's ACTSO. And then we have Kamala Harris coming. I'm guaranteeing you there's going to be some other surprises, because as you get into the 4 or 5 days before the convention opens, we get announcements of people coming. You want to be an observer. If you're not a member of a branch and you're coming as a voting delegate, because this is a business meeting. So even though we'll have some entertainment, some social stuff, some panel discussions, it's a business meeting. So we'll be voting on policy. I chair advocacy and policy. We'll be voting on resolutions throughout the course of the week. But you're going to have a chance as an observer to be registered, to attend functions, to engage in conversations, and be there when the vice president and others come to visit.
Excellent.
Excellent. That's right.
Well, thank you for all the groundwork, foundational work you did to get it here.
You're very welcome.
To get it here in 2023. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. It's always a pleasure. We have been speaking with Michael Curry. I started to say Purry. We've been speaking with Michael Curry. He's president and CEO of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers. He's also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors, where he chairs the board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. After a quick break, we are going to be talking with Pine Street Inn's Lindia Downey. She's here with us for a roundup of the latest headlines at the intersection of housing and homelessness, and there is a lot going on. Don't go away. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Andrea Cabral is in for Jim Browdy, who is on vacation. I'm Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, as we do every Tuesday and every Friday. And if you want to see us, we're streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. And we're joined now by one of our frequent guests. We're so glad to see her, Lindia Downey. She's President, Executive Director of the Pine Street Inn, which, of course, not just not run just the Pine Street Inn, but runs all this housing and has been very instrumental in getting more housing around the city of Boston. Lindia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Good to see you. So, Lindia, I think a lot of people were very surprised to pick up the paper or listen to the news and hear about the Boston Medical Center turning these migrant families away and sort of, more shockingly, in some cases, sending them to Logan Airport, which people were struggling to make the connection about why you would send them there. And I have to admit, and I look back on it, I think it's kind of naive. I always thought that at this point, at this stage, we had crafted this sort of fairly tight network of federal resources and state agencies and nonprofit shelter communities and just this, I thought that was in place. And even though this is an unprecedented surge, that was wrong, right? That was kind of naive? Yeah, okay.
I would say, Andrea, yes. What's happened is there's been about 700 new migrant families come into the state's family shelter system in a few months. Before that, there was probably 300 families, and there was a steady families coming in, families getting placed, and there was capacity in the system, right? We're not a family provider, so we're a little bit on the periphery of this. We have seen some single folks coming that are immigrants. And what happened was, I think at one point there was 100 families in the Boston, the BMC emergency room. And I think, the folks at BMC said, this isn't sustainable for us. The state has opened a series of welcome centers, a couple in Boston, some in Western Mass, to try and help these families secure something, but they're not eligible for very much. And so it's been, I think, a crisis. It's been a little bit under the radar, frankly, but it's a much bigger crisis, I think, than people realize. And I think Boston Medical Center, look, we work really closely with them. I don't think they came to this lightly, of course. I think they are trying to work with the state, and these welcome centers are a place to kind of triage these families and see what the opportunities are. But this is a really tough one because we don't have 700 family shelter beds today available for these families.
And it's separate, right? Immigrant families and homeless in-state families share homelessness, but their needs are very different. I hadn't until I read this information, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, very different.
And why the increase? You said normally it's 300, now it's 700. That's more than double, obviously.
I think the question is, some of these families are showing up at Logan Airport on a plane. Are they coming from Texas and Florida? I don't think we know, frankly. They're being, and when we talk to some of the people we've seen, how'd you get here? Somebody put me on a plane. Somebody told me to come to Boston. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. I think a lot of them are Haitian families, and I think the state of Haiti at the moment, people are really feeling unsafe and scared and all of the things that people have read about. So I think we've seen a big influx of Haitian families. We got a large Haitian community in Boston. Right. People want to come here because there's people here who are from Haiti who speak their language. So I think it's all of it, but I've never seen this level of increase in such a short period of time.
And what's going on? What impact is this joint base on Cape Cod going to have on any of this?
Well, I think any additional capacity is going to be welcome because as of a couple of days ago, all of the new sites that the state has brought up, all the family shelter beds are full. All the new sites the state has brought up are full. So as new families come in, there's going to have to be an alternative, and it sounds like the Cape Cod base will be one of those sites.
And is this like a crisis point that all these places are full, or is this the way business is as usual?
No, this is not usual at all. Typically, as I say, there's the people move out of family shelter, they move in. There's a system to it, Andrea. Exactly, to your point. There's somewhat of a system. Now, there's certainly times when you see these blips, but this is beyond a blip. This is a lot more demand than I think the family system has seen in years, many, many years.
So that leads me to ask about data collection, because one of the things that's mentioned repeatedly in the coverage is that even if we're just measuring it in terms of homelessness, we're not separating out migrant families from sort of people who live in the state, are homeless but live in the state, who are seeking those same services. So unless you have the data, how do you know where to put the resources?
Yeah, and we should be tracking that separately.
Who does track all that stuff? I don't even know.
The state's Department of Housing and Community Development, which really is the front door to the shelter system for families. Not so much for individuals, but for families. They do have an ability to track it. I think they've been, kind of really trying to deal with the demand, and then maybe they'll get to the tracking, but they should, because immigrants have a different set of issues, they have a different set of needs, and frankly, they're eligible for almost no benefits at all, right? If you live in the state and you get into shelter, and you meet the income requirements, you're eligible for housing, you're eligible for a housing subsidy, you're eligible for, some other benefits. Most of these migrants are eligible for nothing, so what's the path out? And I think that's going to be the really difficult problem, right? If all you do is add people in and nobody exits, we're going to have an even bigger problem a few months from now.
That's a really good point, because I always thought that's what being a right to shelter state meant, was that you did get that stuff no matter what.
Well, you get shelter, not a right to housing state. We're a right to temporary shelter. And by the way, it's families only, not individuals. So families do have a right. So when families show up, state is obligated by law to find them something, not housing, temporary shelter.
Well, Lindy Downey, I don't think we've spoken to you since the city's Planning and Development Agency approved this Comfort Inn on Morrissey Boulevard in Dorchester for a residential building, but that's a big triumph. Tell us about the history and what's going on down there.
So since COVID, we have been looking to buy a hotel to convert to housing. And at the beginning of COVID, there was a lot of hotels on the market because people were not traveling. And that's changed, as we all know, in the past year or two. And we're working with Community Builders, our development partner. The Comfort Inn came up for sale. The Community Builders made an offer. They accepted our offer, and we've been working through the process with the community and with the city to try and get zoning relief. We will convert the hotel to 99 units of studio apartments. Hotels are lovely for that because they've already got bathrooms, and they're set up the size of a studio apartment. So we'll add small kitchenettes. We'll have some nice common space for people. We're very excited about it and very grateful to the support in Dorchester that showed up, and to the BPDA board and the city and the mayor's office for helping us move this.
And what do you say to people, because I know there was some community pushback, there always is, but what do you say to people to reassure them that this is not going to be some disaster coming to the neighborhood?
I think people often think of us at Pine Street as only shelter, and we really are mostly doing supportive housing now, and supportive housing at we hope, some degree of scale. And I think people have shelter in their mind. People can just walk in, and that's not true of housing. Everybody gets screened. Everybody has a lease. There's a expectation around you want to comply with your lease, you're going to have to work with us. And then we have staff on site that work with people on everything from going back to work, benefits, health care, mental health care, whatever it might be. And, we now have 34 properties in Greater Boston and Brookline where either we run the property or we own it. And I try to say to people, with limited success, by the way, that look, we didn't get to building 34 by being a bad neighbor. Right. We're not perfect. So I guarantee you something will happen, but we will be responsive. We want to work with the neighborhood. We want to be in the neighborhood. And a lot of the people that are going to go to Comfort Inn came from Dorchester to begin with.
Right.
They came from the city. They lost their housing. They just want a chance to go back to the neighborhood they came from. So, we'll give it our best shot, and we'll do our best to work with the neighborhood and the folks who are concerned.
I want to give you a little more opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. And I can say this because I was a formerly elected official, it disappoints me when elected officials, while they have to be the voice of their constituents, are not simultaneously helping their constituents understand the need for something like that and how it can ultimately benefit a neighborhood. So can you talk a little bit more, because Pine Street's been doing what you just described for a long time. Tell people the success that people enjoy, where people go from that transitional housing and that support, and the stability that they enjoy as they become part of the re-engage with the fabric of their neighborhoods.
Yeah, Andrea, you and I have talked about this in your past life many times, right? Everybody should get a shot at stability and a chance to contribute, right? I was listening to Michael Curry a minute ago. We have lots of guests who had careers and lives. They just want that back again, right? They want some stability. We're not giving them that shot if we can't give them housing, because housing is the platform for everything. You can't really go back to work. You can't really go back to school. There's almost nothing you can do if you're living on the streets or shelter. And housing by itself brings a level of, first of all, we can find you every day. We know where you are, and we can say, hey, how about we start to work on this? We can engage with you. We can build a relationship. you're not afraid where you're going to sleep tonight. So you start to feel safe, and then you start to think, what's next for me? And then, we have support staff. Everybody has a case manager that works with them on whatever brought them into homelessness to begin with. But when I tell you, I was just over at one of our houses in Dorchester with a guy who was living in a tent, and someone set him on fire. Oh. Somebody came and set the tent on fire, and he was badly burned but survived. He's got his own studio apartment in Dorchester. You could eat off the floor in that apartment. Now, this is a man who worked really all his life until he became homeless. He became homeless because of healthcare issues, worked all his life. He's in his early 70s now, so he's retired. And he's got his thing. But he goes out every day. He said to me he was looking for a place to volunteer. He's 72 and had this life. And I think about, he's got a lot to contribute, but we don't give people that chance if we don't at least get them on the path to housing.
Well, what has become the sad reality in Boston is if you do lose your apartment because the rent has gone up beyond your budget, you are kind of screwed because you have to be making so much money now to afford. I think there was a piece in the Globe that said you had to be making $40 an hour to afford. I apologize, I'm not sure if it was a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom. I think it was a 1-bedroom in Boston, which is a lot of money, way beyond what people make. So what are you supposed to do?
Exactly. And there was a big study that just came out in California where they interviewed about 3,500 homeless people. And for almost half the people they talked to, $500 or $600 a month was the difference between them staying housed and them becoming homeless. It wasn't thousands of dollars. In California, it's frankly even worse off than we are. So, but we don't have a way to do that now. We don't have a way to stop those rent increases, and we see people all the time tipping over. And I want to come back to something Andrea said about elected officials supporting these kind of projects. I agree with you. They have the potential to really make an integrated neighborhood and to bring something to a neighborhood. I think the other thing I would say, our guests are your constituents too.
Right.
Our guests vote. They think you represent them.
Yeah.
Why can't they have representation too? Because this idea that they are somehow isolated and alienated just feeds this whole that somehow there's something wrong with homeless people and they can't be part of the mainstream. I can't tell you how enthusiastic our guests are when we do voter registration. They love it. They're into it. They think it's great because some of them think they can't vote. And so when you say to them, hey, you can vote, let's get you registered, people want to be part of civic life again.
Right.
They've lost that through becoming homeless.
And I'm not diminishing that people, there is a great fear around, because so many people who find themselves homeless, certainly not by any stretch all, there are people with mental health issues, people who have issues getting help for that mental health. There are people with addiction issues. Those are the fears that people always elevate immediately right to the top, because that's what makes the news. That's what they see on the news all of the time. Even when there are people in their own family with similar mental health issues who may not be homeless, but similar addiction issues. I hear people say all the time, they will preface their objection to someone else getting housing by saying, like, as though they say it as sort of a street cred thing. Hey, look, I've got people in my family who are drug addicted, or people in my family who have mental health issues that we can't get committed and we can't help. But I don't want this in my neighborhood. And you just kind of look at them and go, but that's help. Like, your family. And if there's a disconnect there between the pain that we inflict on others and the pain that we feel when it is inflicted on us, and it's really hard to overcome.
Agreed. I think we've got to get better systems for mental health, period, for everybody, not just homeless people, right? Homelessness is just the most visible piece of it.
It's a symptom.
No question,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
Substance use too, same issue. We're not the only, everybody struggles to get treatment. No question there.
So we're talking to Lindy Downey, the president and executive director at Pine Street Inn. You just got $1 million from the Cummings Foundation.
Huge.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
So the Cummings Foundation is an amazing foundation. They're based here in Massachusetts. Bill and Joyce Cummings started it. They're a development company. They develop real estate, and all the proceeds from the real estate development goes into the foundation. They're the only foundation I know that does that. And they're unique in that they use volunteers to come out and kind of screen your request. And they have a really big community. And they sent out a notice saying, we could apply for this money. And we asked them for money to help us with people who are staying on the street, flex money. So first and last month's rent, furniture, and all these little things that public money can't pay for. And sometimes it's the strangest, not the strangest of things, but sometimes we want to buy gift cards to keep somebody engaged with us on the street. And they'll only eat, and this is where the mental health piece comes in, they only eat at a certain place. And we're like, great, we'll give you a gift card there and we'll meet you there for breakfast.
Right.
And we will engage with you. And so we're going to use that money, it's a 10-year grant, but we're going to use it for really these flexible things to engage people, to help with first and last month's rent. We had a guy a couple of years ago that we housed, and mental health, struggling, had been an attorney actually in his previous life, and wanted a desk, a particular desk, and he wouldn't stay in the unit. We placed him there, and we kept finding him on the street again. And I kept saying to staff, well, what's he doing? Why is he out there? Wants a desk. I'm like, buy him a desk. Right. Let's figure this out. So that's the kind of stuff that this money, it just brings that other piece, that other connect.
Unrestricted grants help with the intangibles, and that's why you get asked as a donor, like, is this restricted money? Is this unrestricted money? And when you have faith in the nonprofit, as people do in the Pine Street Inn, you trust them to know where that needs to be spent and to spend it in a way that's going to be effective. But that is a fantastic amount of money.
It's amazing, and I just got to do a shout out to the Cummings. They're amazing. Joyce and Bill, who run the foundation, the most amazing people, really are, and just so grateful to them. Okay,
before you go, anything else you want to tell us that's important for you to talk about today? Just about a minute left.
Well, we just started leasing up folks at 140 Clarendon, the old YW. So got about 15 people have moved into the old Y with Beacon Company, our partner, and then we're almost done with another 140 units on Jamaica Plain, right on Washington Street. In about 6 months, I'm hoping we'll be leasing people up there.
How many housing units do you have around the city?
When all of those are done, we'll be about 1,200. We're at 1,000, a little over 1,000 right now. Be about 1,200.
And you get some in Brookline?
We do. 100 units.
Okay, all right.
The next time you come back, we don't have time for it today, but the next time you come back, I want to talk about all of these private landlords that own all these rooming houses that still stand, and how they connect with the state to be incentivized to turn those into further transition housing. That's next on the list.
And all the big-time landlords up on Beacon Hill who are not doing their part on rent stabilization for the city of Boston that Michelle Wu was trying to get. Yeah. I don't know if is there a conflict of interest there in voting against?
I think we've talked about this, and we probably should talk about it again.
Okay, Lindy Downey, great to see you.
Thank you, Lindy. It's always good to see you.
Thank you both.
We've been speaking with Lindy Downey, President and Executive Director for the Pine Street Inn. After a quick break, the Brookline and Cambridge-based deli Mamalas is looking to the community for support in a new crowdfunding operation. We're going to talk with owner Rachel Miller-Munzer in just a minute. Don't go away. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I am Marjorie Egan. Jim Browdy's on vacation. Andrew Cabral is filling in for him. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and on YouTube.com/GBH News. And we are surrounded now by wonderful food from
my goodness.
Mamalas, which is in Cambridge and Brookline. And I've got a corned beef sandwich. What do you got over there?
You actually have a Reuben that the sheer heft.
A Reuben.
That
weighs about 5 pounds.
That is a true deli sandwich. I have a sesame whitefish. Again, the heft of the sandwich. This is real deli food.
Let me just say also, your whitefish has lox on it too.
That's
in
right.
honor of Rabbi Audrey, who likes to eat that sandwich.
Excellent. And I've got this chocolate cake.
So
and I got a soda.
And I have
okay,
a
we should
soda.
say who we're talking to here, actually. We're joined now by Rachel Munzer, owner of Mamalas Delicatessen. She's also Chief Restaurant Officer for Big Dipper Hospitality Group, which operates Mamalas in Brookline, Cambridge, and High Street Place, as well as Vincent's and State Park in Cambridge. And the restaurant's in the middle of this crowdsourcing campaign looking to raise $118,000 to expand. Rachel, welcome back to Boston Public Radio. And thanks
Great to have you.
for all this
Thank you
great
for having
food.
me.
Thank you.
So you opened a second location in Brookline, and you're going.
I was lurking outside there the other day when I ran into Rachel on the street, actually.
Well, I'm really interested in the way that you're getting to your goals, and actually was fascinated by you sort of saying to people when you crowdfund. I guess you do tell people more about, what the things are being, what the money's being raised for. But I love the egg cracker.
I know.
And so tell everybody how'd you get the idea to do it this way? Are you looking for investors, one-time contributors, and what is all of this going to go for?
Okay, so how we got the idea is we opened up our location in Brookline in just about 2 years ago. And when we were getting ready to open that, I was approached by, I was introduced to someone named Ross Chanowski, who was starting a crowdfunding site for restaurants called New Market. And he was just looking to talk to people in the business about how they finance. And he started telling me about this idea he had where restaurants could raise $10,000 to, buy a new oven. And I said, great, I'm opening a new restaurant. Can we raise $250,000?
That's all we need.
Yeah. And he was like, okay. He scaled us back, and we agreed to raise $180,000. You notice a theme with the 18, which is good luck in Judaism. It means life or chai. And in a month, we did this massive campaign and raised $180,000, and it was bonkers. And it was the first. We were the first ones to be launched on the New Market platform. And we used the money to open the Brookline location.
And this is just regular people. Is this? I mean, who do you open it up to when you crowdfund?
So it's the whole idea is it's engaging your community. I mean, we think it's brilliant.
Brilliant.
You engage your community because you're asking for people to make contributions, and for the contribution, they get all the money back plus 20% more in gift cards. So it's very cut and dry. You're going to come to our store anyway. Why not just sort of pre-buy what you're going to buy? You get 20% more. You win, we win, and
that is
happy.
brilliant.
Okay, so how does it work? If people tell us how actually online how it works.
So how we get them, or how they?
I mean, if when you go do this, give us the logistics.
So we nudge every person that we know and every person that we see on the street and people that we haven't talked to in 20 years and ask them to contribute.
Okay.
Then they go online and they basically say, yes, I want to, let's say somebody says they want to contribute $100. They contribute $100, and then as soon as the campaign closes, within a month, they start receiving credits, and it's broken up over a 6-month period. So you get really just a gift card in your email. So if you contributed $100, you get $120, $20 a month for 6 months will get loaded onto your gift card, and then you have a gift card to use, either right away or save up the money or what have you.
And how long did this take between the beginning of the solicitation and opening the Brookline location?
So we started the first campaign, I think we started in February of 2021, and we opened in August.
That's pretty
So we
good.
opened
That's not
6
that
months
much time.
later.
And you should tell people, in case they don't know, in case they have not visited Mamalas. I said I was lurking out in front of your store with my daughter the other day, and I was complaining to you that you closed at 4 o'clock, and you explained why you closed at 4 o'clock, which you couldn't tell me, but I was very impressed by that. But what people can get at Mamalas, if they don't know what it is,
What's on the menu?
Yeah, let's do a free ad here.
Well, let's start with chocolate cake.
Yes, chocolate cake
We
is very
like
good.
we're very proud of our traditional chocolate cake. You also have in front of you some Dr. Brown's celery soda. So we're
Which is
really
excellent.
just, a traditional modern Jewish deli.
Yes, so Rachel's named after you.
It's not named after me.
Oh, it's not? Because I've had that several
Fortunately.
times. I thought that was named after you.
It's not. It's a traditional sandwich,
Yeah.
but when I work in the kitchen and the cooks are calling up Rachel's, and I turn every time. It's pretty fun. We make pastrami, corned beef, fresh rye bread, smoked fish, lox. You have whitefish and lox sandwich. Desserts, we make our own bagels in-house. We really are proud of those.
All good pastries.
Yep, a lot of pastries.
Yep.
Rugelach, babka.
And you have newspapers, at least in the Brookline one, you have newspapers out.
We have newspapers.
Yes, I love that. So if you go in, you're waiting for your order, or you're going to eat
Absolutely.
inside, you can read the paper while you're there, or you can go sit outside and be
That's
served outside. Yeah, I've obviously spent some time there.
You can come on Thursdays when we saw you. My husband, Alon, is a backgammon enthusiast.
That's
and
right.
He runs
Oh,
a
really?
backgammon club.
Oh,
and the
I like
restaurant is
backgammon.
not open. It's just for pure community, really. They sit outside at 6 p.m. on Thursdays and play backgammon. Bring your own board and...
That's excellent. The timing on this is just so good, too, because I just finished watching the second season of The Bear.
Yes.
But right now there are a lot of shows that are about everything from big, giant, really fancy restaurants to, sort of delis and sandwich shops, and people are getting a real glimpse. You go and you order, and then, you get your food. But people now know what it takes behind the scenes to get you a sandwich like the ones that you brought to us today. And there's a real interest in it. And I'm wondering how much of that had a positive impact, that in the use of social media, had a positive impact on your fundraising. People understand what you do better now, so they know what they're really investing in. Not just the end game of the profit, but were you able to use social media or any of the zeitgeist to kind of help with the fundraising?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree. I, by the way, haven't watched The Bear because I don't have the emotional constitution for it.
Well, you do it all day.
But-
It's sort of, that would probably be difficult.
Yeah, it's kind of an erotic staff there at the Bear, I would say.
You might be traumatized doing that all day and then watching other people do it.
I'm very tempted because everybody's talking about it, and
It is really good.
But yeah, there's definitely a sense of pride in people contributing, and they're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, and I'm a contributor to this restaurant, and I was a part of it, and things like that.
So can people continue to do that? Have you stopped raising the money, or is that an ongoing thing where people who want to reach out can always do that?
I mean, that would be great, but it's that's maybe the next business idea. It's only going for 9 more days. Tomorrow we're starting the 8 days of Hanukkah in July. We'll have giveaways.
Good idea.
Talk about social media. We're going to use social media. We'll give away prizes, things like that. We do, as of this just in, we have a corporate contributor called Wico Hospitality, which also is really cool. Do you know Wico?
Yes. Oh, my
do you
goodness.
use them? Aren't
I have
they
ordered from Wico
terrific?
Hospitality. Well,
Oh,
the thing is,
cool.
you order if you are frazzled. You couldn't do it every day unless
Yeah.
you're really loaded. But you could do it once a week and get really restaurant quality food delivered to your front door. And all you have to do most of the time is heat it.
Right.
They send you out a menu. I've done this. Jim told me about
Oh, you
this.
should invite them on the show. They
I
would
should
love
invite them on the show.
love to participate.
And then they charge you for the cost, and then they ask you to contribute to the labor and the love.
Yeah.
So you end up giving them a great big huge tip.
Right.
But the food is excellent, and it takes a lot of stress off people that are rushing from work to get home. You can put a beautiful meal on the table, and you can have what you want, and I can have what I want, and the kids can have what they want. It's great, but I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No, that's perfect. I mean, it's really great. We connected up with them. One of the gentlemen that's part of the corporate team invited us to be collaborate with them on Mother's Day this year, and so we made bagels for their Mother's Day package. And now they're going to match dollar for dollar people that contribute over the next, day or so. Starting today, they're going to match up to $5,000 if people contribute to our campaign. So.
It's WECO.
WECO.
Yeah, WECO.
Hospitality.
And it's great. I usually do it every Monday night because I just can't bear the thought of having to put something together for dinner on Monday nights. Okay, Rachel, what are these?
Gribness.
Please explain.
I'm going to have to say, like, God's gift to the world, maybe.
Okay.
That's a good description.
Another description would be Jewish chicharrones.
Okay.
They're fried chicken skins, and we make them with, we sprinkle a little of our dill pickle salt on them, and you're going to start eating them, and then you're just going to want to keep eating them, and we gave you some celery on the side to go with them. It's a nice, healthy afternoon snack.
Spectacular. I've got the Reuben sandwich.
I'm not even listening to you guys because I'm eating this chocolate cake.
Chocolate cake's spectacular.
Which anybody who knows, affiliated with the show will tell you, I don't eat during the show.
Oh, well, there we go.
No, I just don't.
You
It's just
don't.
like
I'm
I can't.
shoving it
it's
in
like not
left
being
and
able
right.
to walk and chew gum at the same time. Yeah, she and Jim can do it all the time. That is absolutely delicious.
Well, Rachel Sundit, who's my business partner, is the inventor of this chocolate cake. And, oh, hi.
Is she here in the
That's her
audience?
godmother.
Oh, my goodness, right here in the audience.
So nice. Well, she's not here, but she...
The moistness of
is
this, it's like, I
listening.
feel like I'm on one of the baking shows where they're like, the moisture in this cake is just phenomenal. It is really phenomenal.
Yeah, and the pastrami, I've eaten a lot of this stuff, the pastrami sandwiches, the Reuben sandwich, they're really great stuff. Tell us, though, we've talked so much about the restaurant business during the pandemic, that people were in dire straits, obviously, because restaurants couldn't be open. Then we talked about the fact that the generosity in the restaurant business was rather unusual. People making food for their food and delivering it to people that didn't have food during the pandemic, and that was extraordinary. But I think we've gotten a look at the restaurant business, not just through the Bear, but through everything we've been written about, how difficult it is to run a restaurant, the margins that are so small, the difficulty of getting staff. Give us an overview of what it's like to run a delicatessen. A lot of restaurants, you don't serve liquor, but liquor solves a lot of people. Oh, you do serve liquor?
We do in Cambridge.
In Cambridge, okay.
But not in Brookline.
Because that's a big deal in terms
We
of
don't sell that much. Yeah.
increasing profit margin through the liquor, but it's a tough business.
It's tough.
Yeah.
The cynical side of me says it's horrible. The margins are tight. I think the biggest challenge for us, and one of the things that really blew up during the pandemic, was the staffing and employees, and just making sure that restaurant workers are really considered real people with real careers. And we really dug into that concept more so during the pandemic, and trying to work towards better wages, living wages, people being able to work one job and have benefits and things like that. And it's been really challenging because in a business where we were already struggling to make money, we're making less money now, but just sort of trying to work on making it a sustainable industry.
Yeah, and you also can't raise the price of the food too much because then people won't come.
No, but there has to, at some point there has to be some kind of reckoning where, like, that's what the food costs.
Yeah. Right.
And there's
Right. Be realistic.
It's not
Right.
not realistic.
Right.
We work with this organization called High Roads Restaurants, and one of the people with the organization had a saying, there's no such thing as free breadsticks. Because
Right.
it's funny, but it's true, because somebody has to make those breadsticks and somebody has to pay for them, and and somebody's getting a short end of the stick if that's not being accounted for.
And that's the point. Corby Kummer, who's our food and policy guy, makes that point every single segment about the need to see this industry and the people who work in it for the talent that they bring, the effort that they put in, and for the way that they are consistently sort of short-shrifted when it comes time to sort of make the money. And he's always an advocate for your minimum tip is 20%. I don't care. Your tip is 20%. But I do think that some of the atmosphere around these shows that are on have increased people's empathy a little bit. around how hard the work is, because to Marjorie's point, it wasn't until relatively recently, I'd say for myself, I didn't think about what went on behind the counter.
Yeah.
But I think what people also saw during the pandemic was that community of people who work in the restaurant industry coming together to support each other. So are you finding it any easier to get staff now, or keep the morale of the staff that you have up? Has that gotten any better?
Yeah, it's definitely eased up. I mean, it's always been ups and downs. And I think I saw Andy Husbands, he has a restaurant across the plaza from us. I saw him recently, and he said, he's like, we've always run trying to, like, when we're staffed up, when we're staffed up, when we're staffed
Right.
up. And that really in his mentality has changed to, like, this is where we are and we need to work to this level of staffing. And I think that's a helpful sort of shift. But it's been better. And, I do think, like, these challenges of paying better and offering benefits and things like that, although they, technically hurt the bottom line, I think in the long run they pay off, and we have a very wonderful employees and loyal staff, and they tell their friends who want to come work for us and things like that. So
now, I think that before Rachel leaves, Andrea, you should ask her the question we're going to be asking our listeners, because she's in the restaurant business, about the boomers versus the Gen Zers.
I heard that conversation.
Yeah, putting the plates together. Why don't you put it to an expert here?
What's the feedback from your wait staff about the way people are leaving their tables?
So now so I don't know if you know, but we operate, or you do know this, we operate two other, not just the deli, which is like counter service, but we do have two full service restaurants, Vincent's, which is like a neighborhood bistro, and then State Park, which is a bar and restaurant. And I don't know the answer. However, I am now going to go back to the staff over there, and I'm going to check in with them and see if they've watched this video, and get an answer and send you an email and update you.
The essential question is whether boomers like us that would be Andrea and I, are rude and obnoxious and just think that the wait staff is lucky that we showed up to eat our dinner, versus the Gen Z that are full of empathy and sympathy and want to help out with the waiters. I don't buy it for a second personally.
No.
But
I mean, as a Gen Xer, I think it's somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle. That's right. That's where you are, somewhere in the middle.
And very individual,
Well, let me tell you, we're very happy you showed up, not only because you've done well with your funding, but because we have a corned beef Reuben, and we have a chocolate cake, and we have the chicken skins. And what is this soda, please?
That's Dr. Brown's celery soda.
Dr. Brown's
classic deli soda.
It's very good.
It's great.
It tastes like
It's
celery.
very, very
It does
good.
taste
It
like
really
celery.
does.
It's delicious. So thank you very much for coming in,
pleasure.
and good luck with all your endeavors. And why do you close at 4 o'clock, please, in Brookline? Staffing concerns, because you're being a nice owner. Is that what it's about? No.
We found that dinner is challenging.
Dinner's challenging. Okay. I thought maybe 5 o'clock, so I could manage to get there, on time every day would be nice. But that's okay. I don't take it personally.
We just celebrated 7 years, so
7
we've
years.
learned a lot. In that time.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And it's a great deli. Yes, give a hand to Mamalas, because it's a great deli, great food.
Can I tell everybody to go to mamalas.com if they want to contribute?
Yes, please do. Go right ahead. No, say it.
If you want to contribute, go to mamalas.com, and you will get 120% of your contribution back in chocolate cake.
That is a great deal. That is a great deal.
MAMALEHS. Okay. All right. Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you for having me.
We've been speaking with Rachel Miller-Munzer, owner of the great Jewish deli Mamalas in Cambridge, Brookline, and at High Street Place. She's also Chief Restaurant Officer for Big Dipper Hospitality Group, which operates Mamalas in Cambridge and Brookline, as well as Vincent's and State Park in Cambridge. Up next, we're opening the phone and text lines. It's the battle of the generations, boomers versus Gen Z. Are they really that different? 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. Jim Browdy is on vacation. I'm joined today by Andrea Cabral. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. We're eating chocolate cake from Mamalas Delicatessen.
It's really good.
I got the corned beef. You got the white fish sandwich, I believe, over there, Andrea?
I do. I have my soda.
That's right. We have our delicious soda, and we are streaming, if you want to see us, watch us eat, facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Now, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the show with Callie. We talked about it just a second ago with Rachel from Mamalas. She was too polite to really say what she thought, I think. But here's the question. After you eat a meal, what is the proper etiquette around leaving your plates on the table as is versus stacking them neatly in the corner as a thank you to your already overworked server? Now, one waitress posted her findings to TikTok and found a pretty stark difference between Generation Z and their boomer elders. Do you have that sound? I will call for the sound again. This is the waitress on TikTok, and she's talking about what boomers do versus what Gen Z do. And this TikTok video got her in trouble because her bosses didn't like it very much. But let's hear a little bit of sound about the difference involving boomers versus Gen Z.
Okay, here's all I'm saying. This is a table of 5 boomers that I took some plates out of the way already, okay? And then this is a table of 6 Gen Zs. They did that. Just saying.
Okay, it's opened up a can of worms here amongst the Boston Public Radio staff around generational divides, whether older or younger generations really could be more considerate and empathetic. There was another study from the highly reputable online casino Playstar, which found millennials to be the biggest culprits in terms of lying in the workplace and on social media. And of course, Andrew and I are boomers, so we think that's absolutely true, that these millennials are big liars, even though they may be more empathetic in restaurants. This is basically asking you about consideration, empathy, and rudeness of the Gen Z people. And by the way, there can be, some of them are pretty young. This is 11 to 26, right? And the boomers who were born between 1946 and 1964. The number is 877-301-8970, 877-301-8970 to call or text. Is there any truth to these stereotypes? And be honest, what should the rules be around stacking your plates after a meal? 877-301-8970. Okay, Andrea, my fellow boomer, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to start with this. So our producer made the point that there are 2 sides to that story.
There are.
With Kate, she prefers, obviously to have people at her stations, stack their plates for her. But he's actually heard the opposite, where because there is a way that wait staff do this, the way they balance the plates, the way between bowls, plates, and everything else, people who are just stacking it up, believing that they're being helpful and putting all of the uneaten food on one plate, sometimes that creates a problem for them, and they actually don't appreciate it. But I think the larger issue here is we constantly compare generation to generation.
We do.
And so, I was ironically having this conversation with a friend of mine just the other day, where I made some comment about, it was almost like along the lines of kids today kind of comment.
Kids today.
And then I can't believe that it's coming out of my mouth, and it's like I sound like an old curmudgeon.
I know.
Like, well, they don't get that this and this and this and this and this. And then I said, am I just old and cranky? And she was like, yeah, I think we are old and cranky. So, so there's always that kind of comparison. But I do think that there are some generational differences based on what we as boomers left to subsequent generations, who then left other things to subsequent generations.
Right.
We talked about climate change, like for a big part
That's
of the
right.
show earlier today. The notion that politicians is a certain level of corruption that you must accept with politicians. That is all laid at their doorstep from previous generations. So,
okay, our staff put together a list of all the names of all these generations. If you care to hear them, the silent generation, they're now between 78 and 95 years old, so they are at the end of their lives, or near the end of their lives, certainly at 95. Baby boomers, that would be you and me, Andrea, between 59 and 77
which
years old.
I just found out, by the way, and I'm devastated.
That's right. You're a baby boomer, I hate to tell you. Gen X, born between 65 and 80, which would make them 43 to 59. Millennials, they were born between 81 and 96. 27 to 42. Gen Z, the ones that are stacking up all these tables at the restaurants, they're, like I said, between 11 and 26. And then the youngest generation, born they're 0 to 10 years old now, we're going to call them Generation Screwed, right? Because they're the ones that are going to inherit all the mess that people like the baby boomers have made for them. So what do you think about this? Do you think that there's I waited tables a long time. I bussed tables for a long time. I would say that people do have a system for bussing the tables, Andrea, and they've worked it out so they can balance the plates in a certain way. So I would just assume, when I used to bus tables, leave the plates alone. I know how to do it. I've got a system. Don't touch my plates. Margot from Hancock, what do you think?
Hi, Margot.
Hi. I agree with you 100%. I also waited tables forever.
That's right.
And I don't want the customer to try and, tidy up the plates. It usually isn't steady, and I end up having a harder time, basically, if I just collect the plates myself.
Exactly. You have a system. Now, on the other hand, Margot, I do always, if the wait person comes over and they haven't wiped off the table, I will wipe it off myself to remind them that they should be wiping off the table. That's kind of not very nice, I suppose, but I have done that.
Yes.
But were you supposed to wipe off the table when you were waiting tables? Absolutely, right?
Yes, absolutely. But you don't want to leave it sopping wet either.
You don't. You have to be very careful. Margot, thank you for
But let's not lose the nuance there, right?
Okay, what's the nuance?
So Margot said she's a boomer and she wants to balance it all out herself.
That's right.
Like, how much of and Kate, the woman who did the viral video, it sounded like she was probably a millennial, or maybe a Gen Z. So how much of it is feeling as though people actually should do that? That's what part of the argument is that they're saying, like, boomers are, that the narrative is sort of that boomers are saying the wait staff should do it. Millennials feel as though the customer should clean up after themselves. That's a generational difference in how you absorb your workload, in other words. I have a great story about this, actually. It's very brief. I'll be really brief.
You can be as long as you want.
A very prominent person told me. No, I can't tell you who it is.
Really? Do I know who it is? Are they a politician?
You do.
Oh, man or
you know
woman?
who it is. Don't narrow it down. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
Said that his son, who was a supervisor, was supervising and had assigned something to someone, and that person said the person didn't do it correctly, and so when he is sort of attempting to sort of say, look, this shouldn't have been done this way, it should have been done differently. Now, this is someone who is talking to their supervisor, said, well, can't you just do it and give it back to me? Can't you just do it?
Wow. That's great.
Yeah, I said it with a straight face and meant it. Like, I can't figure this out. And keep in mind, we have a generation that was taking classes at universities to learn how to open a bank account, to learn how to manage finances, because somewhere all along the line that has been lost. The fundamental idea that if you have to figure it out for yourself, that's been lost in some respects. And so that's part of that generational legacy that we've now incurred, and in 2023 that's what we're seeing. So the idea that you should get started on clearing the table versus waiting for me to do it, to some degree they seem to be coming by it somewhat honestly.
Did that secret person win re-election, or were they defeated?
I didn't say it was a politician.
Okay.
And I'm not telling who it is.
877-301-8970. Let's go to Elisa in Hudson. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Elisa.
Hi, it's so wonderful to talk to you for the first time, long-time listener.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Except to turn my radio down.
Okay.
I am a boomer. My husband is actually not quite a boomer. And I always clear, but I do it carefully. I was a waitress for a long time. I make sure there's no silverware mixed in, so it's easy. And he and my daughter, who's 31 or whatever generation that puts her in, they get annoyed with me because they think that I shouldn't be bothering to do that. But I can't not do it in good conscience.
Well, there you go. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're defying the stereotype. Thank you very much for the call.
We do have people texting in to say, basically, forget about whether or not people are clearing the table. How do they differ in tips? Like, what do boomers tip better than Gen Z? That's where the rubber meets the road, is on the tips. But we definitely have people who are saying that they're waiting, their wait staff. It depends. Sometimes it depends on the restaurant. But we have somebody who's a wait person who's in their 40s at 9 Park in Clio, and she said the take is that it's tasteless for customers to stack plates, and she says she's Gen X.
Well, those are also very nice restaurants, too, aren't they? Here's one. My husband and I are Gen X, and we are always neatening up our table. My sister, always Gen X, leaves a horrific mess. I think it all comes down to whether you are a nice person or an anal sphincter. How'd you like that one?
Well, that certainly is pretty succinct about two different types of people.
Rebecca in Boston, thanks for calling.
Hey, Rebecca.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling.
I am calling because I'm totally lost on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't stack plates at restaurants. I don't think I ever have.
That's okay, Rebecca.
Now, if the server...
It's okay to admit it.
Now, if the server...
We'll work it through with you.
If the server comes over, if they're clearing...
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe I'm on the inside seat or something, I might help by handing them a plate that they would have a hard time reaching. But the stacking thing is, and I'm a boomer.
Yeah, well...
Don't feel bad, Rebecca.
But
it's not so bad. Did you leave a good tip? That's the bottom line.
We're definitely 20% above tippers.
Okay, well that makes up for it. When I was waiting, I didn't care what they did on the table as long as they left me a big tip. That was the bottom line. You know what I mean? Or the people that really made a mess were the ones that you serve them a lobster. When they wouldn't put the lobster bib on, and then they get like drawn butter and lobster juice all over them. And they were always a problem. You have to tell them you should wear the lobster bib, especially if they were in the Midwest and they didn't know how to cut up a lobster. You know what I mean? That's always very important. You can make a real mess with a lobster.
And it's really about clearing up. Like if you have lots of plates, you've had a lot of dishes, it's really about, putting things sort of neat and orderly way. But Nina from Putnam has texted us and said, she doesn't stack the plates at a restaurant because stacking dirties the underside of the plate.
Oh,
which is
that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Right, and maybe that's why they kind of don't want us to do it. They may actually be separating. That's why they put them on their arm, probably. You see plates, and then the bowl, and then if you stack them, then you get the refuse that's on whatever you've stacked it on.
Now, we didn't touch on this issue, Andrea, but a texter brought it up. She says because boomers have manners. It's rude to scrape plates at the table. That is the unanswered question. Are you stacking alone, or are you scraping before you stack?
No, most people that stack take all of the remaining food on all of the plates that they're getting ready to stack, and they put it on one plate.
That's right.
And put it on the top.
That means they've scraped it before they've stacked it. I'm not sure how I feel about the scraping. What do you think?
I'm just thankful to be part of a show that is dealing with the most pressing issues of the day. And solving the world's problems.
But
this is important.
That sound of scraping can be very disturbing. You know what I mean? Okay. It's like people that eat. You can hear their teeth on the fork. I used to always get yelled at about that when I was a kid.
I've never noticed that in my whole life.
Don't run your teeth over your fork. It makes a very disturbing noise. It's kind of like chalk on a blackboard. You know what I mean? It's very bad.
I have to go out and eat with you just for the sheer experience of it, because I have a feeling there's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I was harassed about a lot of things having to do with the way I ate my food. Okay, where are we going next?
Lisa, who's in the car. Hi, Lisa.
Hi there. I'm loving this conversation.
Oh, good.
I think the biggest question is, different generations have a different sense of what customer service is. I worked many years in a restaurant. I've worked in a bakery. And if I am asking for something or not doing something because it's the worker's responsibility, sometimes my children will be like, Mom, you're embarrassing me. You shouldn't be asking for that.
Yeah.
But I just remember a time, here's a good example. I was getting a cake for my son, who is our forensic person. And for his graduation, I wanted these 3 small cakes. One with a D, one with an A, and then one with an A. They had them in the case in front of me, and I wanted to order them for 2 days later. And the young woman said, well, you have to order this minimum size because it's like a certain price. And I'm like, but you have these 3 cakes. And she says, well, we make them to sell in the store. And I'm like, well, I'm in the store. And I'm like, so if I come on Saturday to get them, could you take all the flowers off them? Because I just wanted plain cake, one with an D, one with an A, and one with an A. D and A. That's all I wanted. And she wasn't getting it. And I wasn't getting it. And I literally said to her, I mean, this is a wonderful bakery. I said, I've been coming here for years and I've never been told no before. And I didn't feel like I was asking for anything big. I just wanted 3 small cakes with DNA.
So,
and they refused.
So what happened? You just left without them? Was that the end of the story?
I left without them, and I wanted to get a sheet cake instead because I couldn't find another bakery in that short time to do it.
Okay.
So I sent my parents down to get it, and I just wanted like a big D and an A written on the cake. And I think they remembered it was me because it was like a half sheet cake, and the D and A was all of like 4 inches.
That's like a Seinfeld, a portion of a Seinfeld episode.
Lisa, that was a great call. Thank you very much. Here's a texter who says, I go out to eat as a way of relaxing. I do the dishes at home. The food I cook at home costs less than food at a restaurant. That cost covers someone else stacking the dishes.
See, now I will just say to you, I do it not every time I go out, but I do it because I thought I was being helpful. I never considered remotely that I was interfering with someone else's job. And it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction because you kind of do it at home.
Yes.
Right? So I thought I was being helpful, but now I'm going to kind of go back and see what reactions I got to doing that because I don't know if people always said thank you and then took the plates away. But maybe they didn't want me to do it. But I was doing it out of nothing more than, I can do this. I'm here. I can do it.
Did you see the screen, the person responding to your remark about doing everything, boomers figuring it out for themselves?
I think this person may have misunderstood me. So we have an anonymous texter who said, is responding to my story about whether or not I'm just old and cranky. She said, guess I should tell my boomer mom to figure her tech stuff out on her own, right? Mm-hmm. Since boomers are, quote, all about figuring it out for themselves. That wasn't the point I was making. I was making the point that the fact that we have a generation of kids who have to take a class to learn how to open a checking account is because we're not teaching them those basic skills as older people. And I wasn't telling them to go figure it out for themselves. I'm saying we may have failed them. So I'm sorry, anonymous texter. I wasn't insulting your generation. But I do think that we may have left them behind a little bit in the skills that you need to get by every single day.
I have noticed from the text, Andrea Cabral, there's a serious divide here among our texters. Melissa from Rhode Island's weighted tables, Gen X, plates should not be stacked by patrons or staff.
Yeah.
Stacking should happen away from the table. Tip well, be kind. And then right above this, it's about common courtesy. I've worked in restaurants my whole life. I'm a millennial. In my experience, everyone in the industry appreciates when plates are stacked respectfully and typically judges those who leave a huge mess. So I don't think we've gotten to the bottom of this.
No, we haven't.
We haven't gotten to the bottom
and
of
I think it's it depends on the type of restaurant, depends on the experience of the wait staff. There's a lot of things that factor into it. I don't think it's necessarily generational.
Exactly. It's a very complicated subject, no doubt. Sarah from Cambridge is going to try to wrap this up for us. What do you think, Sarah?
You're a final caller and you're a Gen X, right?
Yes. Hi, love you guys.
Thank you.
Hi.
So I waited tables for years, and when I go out to a casual restaurant, I constantly have wait staff say, you worked in a restaurant before, haven't you? Because I know how to staff. So here's what I would suggest. If you haven't worked in a restaurant, do not staff. If you have worked in a restaurant, in a casual restaurant, staff. But if you're at a nice restaurant, it's tacky.
Okay, Sarah, we have an important question. Okay, go ahead.
Everybody needs to learn how to tip properly. There is no excuse anymore. There's a calculator on your phone.
That's a great point. But I have an important question for you. I think we can at least get to the bottom of this. A texter says, stack when you can with common courtesy. No scraping. Now, how do you feel, Sarah, about the scraping end of this whole discussion?
I think that's kind of gross. So if you're going to stack, you have to know how to do it. Like I said, you only stack if you've worked in the industry. If not, but if you're also a slob and just making a huge mess, try to just clean that up a little bit.
Sarah, that was a great call to end this discussion. Thank you very much.
She solved the entire thing.
I know,
for
I'm going to
us.
be very self-conscious when I go out to eat again, Andrea. I'm not going to know what to do.
That's all the time that we have. Thanks for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. Tune in on Monday. Marjorie is out, but I will be hosting with Jim. Lucky me. We'll speak with Boston Globe columnist Renee Graham, the Reverends Irene Monroe and Emmett G. Price III, and the Ground Truth Project's Charlie Sinnott. Also have film critic Odie Henderson and 2 transit legislators, State Senator Brendan Crichton and State Representative William Strauss. Our crew is Zoe Matthews, Aidan Connolly, Nicole Garcia, and Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker, and our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to the BPL team, Brad Lewis, Evelyn Brito, and Dan Lesu. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrea. It's been fun.
It's been a pleasure, Marjorie.
Talking to you, and hope you have a great time on Monday. Thank you, people who came down to the Boston Public Library. Really appreciate it. And to all our great guests today.
Have fun at the NAACP convention.
Absolutely,
I will. It's going to be a barn burner from what I hear.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Andrea Cabral.
Thanks again for tuning in. Hope you can tune in again on Monday for Andrea and Jim, and have a great weekend.